Hey guys, welcome to Thrive Bites Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for listening on. You could have been anywhere in the world and you decided to spend just a few moments of your precious time, and we greatly appreciate it. Here on the podcast, we talk about three things: living a plant-powered lifestyle, enhancing emotional resilience, and creating a thriving mindset. And I interview a range of passionate guests such as physicians, dietitians, coaches, entrepreneurs, and many more. And please join me as I deliver these engaging, informative, and high-valued conversations for you. So what are you waiting for? Come on inside. Hey guys, what's going on? This is another episode of Thrive Bites, and we have a wonderful episode. I'll be interviewing the representatives of Ambrosia, which is a linen produce bag, and their mission is to be able to sustainably store as an alternative for your produce, vegetables, and fruits alike. Their story is wonderful, family-owned, female-led and owned as well, and they have very, very humble beginnings, and over the greater part of the decade, they've made an incredible amount of changes to help you to sustainably live. So you don't want to miss their story, and I'll see you guys inside. Okay, guys. Well, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for being here with us. You could have been anywhere in the world, and you decided to spend your free moments with us, and we greatly appreciate it. Today, we have not one, but two guests on the show today. They are representatives of Ambrosia. This is a linen refrigerator bag company. This is a family-owned, female-founded company, which is based in Ojai, California. And they are doing their best and their contributions to give back to the world with their linen produce bags. And I cannot wait to dive deeper and to learn more in terms of what they're putting out there. So please welcome to the stage Jordan and Grae. Hello.
Hey, Colin. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you so much for being here on the show. And where are you guys calling from?
I'm in Los Angeles, just in Echo Park, Los Angeles. Grae?
Yeah, I'm in Northern Arizona, actually. But we've met in California.
Okay, awesome. Sometimes when companies are formed or have been formed over time, it's interesting because a lot of the company members don't actually meet one another. They're just like so remote and far off, but it doesn't sound like that applies to you guys.
You know, Grae walked up to our booth at the Heirloom Festival in Ventura, and she was cute and bubbly and walked up and basically said, "I love what you're doing. I want to be involved." And almost 2 years ago, here we are, still doing it, still rocking it.
I love it. I love it. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. So let's talk about the origin story of the company. I know, Jordan, you and I have talked offline, and it got started with a family member. So let's talk about from A to Z, how the company originated and what are the aims of what is this supposed to represent?
You know, Colin, I have to give it to my mom. It's like one of those great stories that kind of blend necessity and a little bit of luck. In 2015, my mom, who has always been an avid gardener, had a basil harvest that was absolutely insane. It was the biggest basil harvest she had ever had, definitely the biggest basil harvest I've ever witnessed myself. And just like most gardeners, she wanted to kind of find natural solutions to stretching the basil harvest and making sure that she really didn't have any waste. So she made a bunch of pesto. She got sick of pesto. She started freezing basil puree, and that was good. But when basil is made into a puree, it kind of tastes a little bruised, and it's definitely not that fresh application. So she started thinking, how can I fix this? And she remembered her grandmother from Arkansas way back in the day, and she would store her collard greens and her kale in wet linen tea towels. She would store them next to her rolled up dresses in the ice box. It was way before the refrigerator was even a thing, literally a cold box with a block of ice. So from there, it worked. it worked pretty well at least. And she decided that she was going to take that kind of logic and principle and she was going to sew it up in a bag. And so she went into her amazing sewing room that I have so many memories of as a little kid, and she sewed up one of her linen tea towels into a relatively simple bag. She harvested the basil, and sure enough, it worked even better than rolling it up.
Mm.
And from that point, she knew she had something. She didn't know it was ambrosia yet, but she knew it was something. And she showed her friend Mary Lynn one day over the fence. Mary Lynn said, "Oh, that's really cool." And then a few days later, she said, "Mary Lynn, it's still looking perfect." Mary Lynn said, "Well, awesome." Not really knowing what to say. And then by like day 7 or day 8, my mom said, "Look, Mary Lynn, the basil is still totally edible and really, really impressed." And Mary Lynn said, "You have something here. Don't let it go. You have to pursue this." And so my mom took that as kind of like, I don't know, a note from the gods. And she booked a plane ticket to Europe. And she went through 5, 6, 7 different linen mills and learned everything that she could about linen, about the history, about the cultural and historical significance, where it fit into medicine and culture, all the way down to like the mummies in Egypt. They were all wrapped in linen, and it was to draw out the moisture from the mummy, to preserve the mummy. She actually initially wanted to call ambrosia bags mummy bags, but I thought that was probably kind of counter.
It would sell differently.
It was slightly different. But, whatever. We're in 2025. It's crazy. 10 years later, here we are with ambrosia. And it was all thanks to that bumper crop of basil.
Oh, nice. I was about to say, what year that was. So 2015?
That was in 2015, yeah. We officially launched in 2016.
Awesome. Yeah. And where is your mother still with us? Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. She still is. Yeah.
Nice. What is the aim, from this? Was there at the time other storage solutions that were in the market that were just as competitive, or, did she tap into a sector where, there's not that much, here? And obviously there's a belief and a drive behind the product, but what was the other competitors like in the market? Were there other types of solutions like this?
It was pretty limited in 2015. I would say the most direct competitor was Debbie's Green Bags, which is a plastic bag. It reduces ethylene gases within the bag. And they do their job. They work. They actually work pretty well, but unfortunately, they're composed of plastic that doesn't decompose all that well, and they do have limitations, principally like the size and also the applications that you can use. Outside of that, glass has always been used to store and in certain ways preserve as well if kept in an anaerobic state, so submerged underwater, or just like most families throughout the 90s, I would say Tupperware was probably the biggest solution for most.
Yeah. Which brings us to our next question is, there's a huge prevalence of plastic, right? Yeah. And we are now learning more and more of the dangers, not just environmentally, but in my world, medically as well. So either one can answer, but, what have you found that you've learned in terms of the negative impacts, especially plastic has now from a solution standpoint?
Right.
Oh, it's absolutely insane. I was just listening to Dr. Shauna Swan's podcast with Dr. Huberman and also with Joe Rogan, and it blew my mind, with the phthalates. And then just like I've learned a while ago, but just recently remembered how when everyone was upset about BPA, right? And they put those labels of BPA free on things and we kind of forgot about it. But unfortunately, they did so many different variations of that. And the same way, and I'm sure you know so much more about this than I do, but they can leach in the same way or even worse in some cases. So it's just so interesting that you think you can have with innovations these solutions to plastic, especially with everyday consumption of kitchen products or gardening products. But really, when it comes down to it, like with Ambrosia, with the raw flax linen, it's just kind of going way back to what originally worked and what Jordan was kind of talking about with that origin story, So I think that Ambrosia produce bags, they came out, 2016. But really, it's something that's been going on for the longest time. And I think that that's what a lot of people are trending more towards now anyways, is like, how did we do this before, World War II, when we started depending on plastic and these new variations of plastic, So it's pretty crazy. I was learning that, and I'm sure you could talk more on this. I have a 4-month-old, and I was just learning about how the phthalates, they can go through the placenta even. And so even if, a lot of people, they kind of are laissez-faire with their own health, but I think it's interesting to even think about how it affects future generations too, which is a huge motivator, don't you think?
Yeah, we are, just recently we found micro and nanoplastics being not just within the human body, but also within living tissue, lungs, and also the brain now because of, the evolution of plastic, single-use plastic,
Yeah.
how much it has decimated our ocean systems. So it's, we're talking about storage solutions today, right? And so my question is, I got 2 questions that sprung up in my head is, Jordan, you've mentioned Tupperware.
Sure.
So, aside from Tupperware, and I'm sure there's other different types of plastic storage solutions as well. In terms of plastic as a storage solution, how much of the market do they dominate?
99.5%. I mean, we are but a speck on the backside of a black bear in this big forest, I'd say. Yeah, we're really trying our very best to make massive impact, but we have a big journey ahead of us, truthfully.
Gotcha. And then in terms of the linen, you mentioned roots in European, right? Are there other cultures, that use this similar way, or is it, mainly historically and culturally European, would you say?
Yeah, so linen has really only been, flax has only been a crop in Western Europe, as well as kind of Russia and then post-Soviet countries, Ukraine, Belarus, Bulgaria, areas of that such. But then I think previously, when Egypt was a lot greener, they were also growing a lot of flax as well. And so that was their primary fabric. It wasn't cotton like Egypt is growing now. It was primarily flax linen. So, but in the application of food, truthfully, in all of my research, I have not found any support that it's been used. I know that my great-grandmother used it. I know that I've been using it since my mom's very first prototypes in 2015. But historically, there's been significance with medicine. At one point, I know that stitches were actually made from the thread of flax linen. I know that medical bed sheets in Europe especially are still made from linen because of the antimicrobial qualities. When it comes to food, I think we're I'm not going to say we're total pioneers, but pretty close. Ancient pioneers, I would say, almost.
Ancient in a modern world.
Yeah. Fighting modern day problems. Yeah.
Grae, we have talked online and offline, and you had mentioned that your husband is a apple farmer, and you've helped cultivate, pun intended, in terms of farms as well. Can you speak to me about what is going on from your purview with just waste, right? Because that's essentially the purpose of the brand, right? Of the product itself is to being able to sustainably minimize as much food waste as possible. Can you help with the listeners? What is our issue? What is the gravity of food waste in our country from your purview?
To me, I think it's just mainly a disconnection of really being able to see where the food is grown, how it's harvested, processed, and then distributed. So I think that there's two thought processes with it, like people who shop locally are more aware of it, and with their food waste, they're more aware of like composting and things like that and making like bone broths and stuff. But then there's the average consumer that buys produce grocery store. And I think that the biggest issue with what makes produce waste so common is just that disconnection of like knowing where it comes from and how hard it is to actually grow that produce and get it to the point where it's at your table, And then I think with awareness of that, with produce and meat and flowers even, you automatically want the higher value produce, which when you invest more money into the food that you eat, you're going to want to make it stretch as long as possible or as far as possible in many applications, And then I think what makes it even more fun in a way to reduce your waste is getting into like, if you are concerned about that microplastic exposure, well, what foods help me detox from this? Or, like fermented foods. Oh, well, I have a surplus of these carrots, like let me pickle them. Or, I think that that's where it becomes a lot more fun to combat that food waste, So I think, I could go into more so of like from the farmer's perspective, but I think for an average consumer, I think it's like missing out on the fun of food and, more of an idea of, instead of eating to live, living to eat, and just using that to further your health. You know what I mean? That's what I think. That's what I've learned, and just for the food waste.
In recent episodes, I've had someone done a lot of research in terms of food policy and the Farm Bill and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I was really shocked and surprised to hear that the average farmer in this country is, I think, early 60s or mid 60s. And there's not a huge push to cultivate and nourish and foster a new younger generation of farmers. So what ends up happening is that, the farming conglomerates pretty much swoop in and take over smaller farms, which is very poignant because over time, in terms of the healthcare system, healthcare corporations and conglomerates swoop up and take care and absorb smaller practices, which is very, very interesting that we both made that light bulb moment during that episode. And the surprising fact that I've learned from that was 2/3 of our fruits and vegetables were imported from outside of America, which has a lot to do with how we subsidize certain crops and, how we, concentrate non-vegetables and fruit products as well. So that becomes a whole different topic and very multi-layer, but it contributes to what we're talking about today. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Dr. Colin Zhu, and we are very, very excited to officially announce that we are starting a cookbook. This has been a long time coming, and this is the pre-order campaign, and we are so excited for this project. So guys, as a reminder, we live in a world where 72% of us are overweight, about 40% are obese here in America. More than half of the top 10 causes of death are attributable to dietary and lifestyle changes. The top 2 being heart disease and cancer year after year after year. 1 out of 3 of us are pre-diabetic. We live in a world where we are immersed in ultra-processed, calorically rich, and nutrient-poor foods, as well as animal-based foods. And this leads to a whole host of problems. And yet, 88% of countries outside of America face 2 or 3 forms of malnutrition. And not only that, our soil health is very poor due to modern agriculture, which is 99% of what we practice here in America. And that leads to a lot of issues in terms of biodiversity loss, in terms of soil degradation, a lot of resources being used because of animal agriculture. And that has a huge environmental impact and also an impact to our individual health. So the aim of this book is to connect all of these dots, how our food choices affect our individual ecosystems and how that creates a ripple effect to our community and towards planetary health. And so I am enlisting a lot of my friends and colleagues. We're going to have over 25 experts ranging from physicians, chefs, dietitians, environmental experts, and farmers to collaborate to write this book. The book is a cookbook which is filled with plant-forward recipes that are both seasonal, balanced, traditional, multicultural, and nutritious and delicious at the same time. It's not just going to be a cookbook, it's also going to be a strategy book as well. So this pre-order campaign is to not only get your copy of the physical book, but also a digital copy. And if you order for this pre-order campaign, you'll also get free access to the TheChefDoc Academy, which has been 8 years of work and valued over thousands of dollars. The aim of this book is to get over 1,000 pre-orders in order to get the best traditional publisher to make a massive impact. And so, guys, be part of a movement, not only be able to find all the things that you want to do for your individual health, but also for your family and community, and play an actionable role to be able to save the planet that we're on now. So, click on the link to find out for more information, and we can't wait for you to join this movement, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. When we go to big farming conferences like Acres, we're definitely the youngest people there, and it draws a lot of attention. But I will say that for a lot of those older farmers that have the bigger properties, they want someone to pass along their business and the farm too. But unfortunately, it's just like not very well educated or spotlighted or, revered in our communities to be a farmer. But I do think being in that community, that is shifting, and a lot more people are wanting to farm and get back to kind of our natural roots of like hands in the soil, building the soil, growing the food. I really do think that I have a big hope for that.
Gotcha. Let's talk about the products a little bit more. I know for those that don't know, you have different bags for different types of produce. You have your greens, your berries. I see a mushroom bag here as well, which is really, really cool. Are there differences between each one of them? Can you break that down for us, Jordan?
Yeah, sure. So Ambrosia really started with just the vegetable bag. And the vegetable bag is based on moist ecosystem, if you will. And so one of the many cool benefits of flax linen is that it can hold 3 times its own weight of water. It's also, due to the weave, really breathable. Cotton has a tendency of mildewing and molding, especially when consistently wet, whereas linen has this really amazing ability to stay moist while allowing the contents to respirate. And so for leafy greens and for vegetables, that's the technology that we have in play. The weave is laid out in such a way that the produce can breathe while tight enough to hold that moisture within the hollow fibers of the linen itself. So that is really kind of the principle behind the leafy greens and the veggie bags. Humid state, and it can it can add 1 to 2 weeks of shelf life, depending on what you have in there. Whereas with the mushrooms in the berry bag, they kind of work opposite. So those bags will actually draw out excess moisture that you'll find on the surface of produce. And that's the stuff that will incubate microbial growth and create slimy mushrooms, as well as prematurely moldy berries. And so the linen will draw that surface moisture up, and because of the antimicrobial qualities, actually kind of slow that natural process down as well.
Mm-hmm. So that means that, because you have it color coordinated, right?
Exactly.
So basically, from what I gather, it's best to actually use it in the way that it's color coordinated.
100%. With one exception, you can, if you are like me and you buy mushrooms in bulk. I go to the Korean market, and every Monday I'll buy my mushrooms for the entire week, sometimes for a week and a half. And so I'll bring all of them home, and I'll actually put them in the berry bags because it's a dry storage bag. I'll put it in my bread drawer, in my refrigerator, and those mushrooms will never be slimy. What happens is after about 5 to 7 days, they start losing some of the water weight. And after a week and a half, 2 weeks, depending on the mushroom, some of them will actually fully, especially the smaller like beach mushrooms, they'll fully dry and they'll desiccate, but then they can be reanimated with a little rehydration. So just like dried Asian mushrooms that you'll put into stock to flavor soup, you can do the same thing at home with Ambrosia mushroom bags. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very cool. It's very simple, because I have all the bags, and, they're very simple. The colors really speak to it. And it definitely re-educates in terms of, where do you put it into your fridge and how, you would store it. Is it recommended to fill it to the brim, like just to pack it all in? Or do you recommend like, oh, don't exceed, how like a blender that says, do not exceed this line before it spills over?
Genuinely, for the vegetable and the leafy greens bag, more is merrier. And we also really like to encourage people to store their vegetable and leafy greens bag in the same crisper drawer, as the moisture from one bag will help continue hydrating the other bag next to it. So typically with the vegetable bag, I will use that as kind of like my catch-all for beets and carrots at the very bottom, rutabagas if I'm feeling fancy. I'll in the middle put typically celery, and above that I'll put more fragile stuff like asparagus or peppers, and at the very top cucumbers, because the skins in cucumbers can be exceedingly fragile, and if crushed, it's all kind of, it'll all go awry from there. With the leafy greens, typically we can put up to 3 heads of romaine hearts in there, and that's kind of how we built the sizing for that. Mushrooms, really, you can stuff it as tight as you like, as long as you don't bust that zipper. You're pretty good on that. The only exception is with berries. We do like to encourage our customers to use the paper or cardboard berry holders, the trays, to hold blackberries and raspberries, because they are so fragile, and if you jostle them too much, you can encourage kind of diminished lifespan. Whereas with the strawberries and the blueberries, they can take a little bit more of a beating.
Gotcha. Has other customers voiced in terms of, beyond the produce bags, what you guys will go into next? We've over time, we've heard about single straw use. We've heard about paper straws. We've heard about produce bags in terms of grocery usage as well. Here in California, there is, you have to pay, per bag, right? Other states, not all states have implemented this, right? So that's still an issue. It's just, it's so hard to get away from all plastic, right? So how have, does that come into mind in terms of what you guys are considering next, or do you have something to, as recommendations, for customers that are thinking beyond just storage?
I think for us, it's about building an ecosystem around sustainable living in the kitchen. And I think that's where we're going to live for the next couple of years. I think from the journey from the grocery store or the farmer's market to the kitchen is definitely something that we are looking at exploring. We're actually really excited about a new naturally insulated tote bag that we're going to be coming out with very soon. And then going through the process of loading the bag and using the bag, and then also now coming out with, or soon to come out with, a solution for cleaning the bags, a natural solution for cleaning the bags. And that'll be able to be used in the machine wash as well as hand washing the sink. So just kind of like creating this, cohesive and yet holistic approach to sustainable living.
Yeah. Grae, I don't know if you can speak to, in terms of the kitchen, right? Are there common inefficiencies that you hear customers, have or talk about or voice about? How do I improve the setup, or how do I make the kitchen, using Jordan's words, more sustainable? Can you speak to that, or either of you?
Yeah, a lot of what we talk about too and we promote is making sure that you're practicing the best practices for using the bags, like making sure that your refrigerator is clean and it's not accelerating the produce going bad. Or what do you think, Jordan?
I think that
specifically?
I cook every day. I know TheChefDoc, you cook a lot as well. And I think that as you cook, you start developing these routines in the kitchen. And if in the back of your head, you almost live by a mantra of waste less, you start developing these funny habits like, saving the end bits for your compost. I think that's something that I always thought everyone did as a little kid, only to realize, no, most people just throw that in the trash. Or instead of wasting the water from rinsing off produce or just washing things, I'll actually have a bowl that catches the water, and I'll use that gray water to water houseplants. It's these like small little changes that you implement in your kitchen life and your life in general that really can make pretty big impacts when looked at, through your lifespan, through the span of the year. I would love to crunch some numbers and actually give you some real numbers about how much water I save, how much produce I save. It's pretty encouraging, honestly.
We had mentioned about post-war, and we've talked about a little bit about plastic, industrial revolution, post-war revolution. But in terms of, there was a time where we had gardens, we had victory gardens, actually. And it almost sounds like, just hearing from both of you speak, that it will be instrumental and actually more beneficial if we actually gardened. And that could range from, starting off with an herb garden to, something a little bit bigger, given, your size, your lot size, what you have. Can you guys speak to that in terms of how beneficial can that be? What does it take, for starters, that haven't, don't have, let's just say, a plot of land? Can you speak in terms of that, how much more benefit we can just for general well-being?
Grae comes from a big kind of growing background, and so do I. So I think either of us can take this one.
I think there's so many benefits from starting a garden. And I think where you would start is watching where your sun hits on your property, whether it's a balcony or a backyard or a little bit of a plot, and figuring out how much sun you get on that part and for how long, then figuring out what do we eat a bunch of and your family size, then growing that. But I think the benefits are crazy. I mean, like you were saying with those victory gardens, it was like doing your duty for your country by growing food, by being able to support yourself, and we've kind of like swung back so far in the other way now. And I think not only by the time we get our produce at the grocery store and we get it home and we cook it, that nutrient value is so diminished. And so I think not only are you getting these higher vibrational foods, you're learning how to cook, you're proud of what you grew. It's a family activity. You have your hands in your soil, you nerd out with your neighbor, maybe you start a community compost pile. I think that the benefits are endless, not even to think about the stuff that you could probably go really deep into, like the microorganisms in the soil and how that gets into us, and just smelling soil and, all of that. I think it's super important,
Yeah, the grounding quality that you can achieve in the garden is absolutely amazing. When I moved into our duplex, and we're in Echo Park, so we're about a mile away from downtown LA, we actually downsized 300 square feet from this beautiful brownstone 1-bedroom in downtown to a much smaller space. But what this space had was arable land. It's like a big enough backyard to actually have like a small edible forest. And, the move happened in the middle of COVID. I had all the time in the world, and it became my living moat from the outside world. And now, I mean, if you go into my backyard, you can get full just walking around, picking at this and picking at that.
Yeah.
And there's something absolutely so gratifying. I think everyone who's grown a vegetable or something can attest. There's something so gratifying about planting a seed or a little starter, taking care of it all the way through, and then being able to eat it and share it with others. You can feel a connection to that piece of produce that you just can't get otherwise. I mean, at a farmer's market, meeting the farmer is great. And I love talking with farmers, but being able to grow it yourself, and then also being able to grow your vocabulary of ingredients is really neat. We're growing kohlrabi for the first time this year. And I've never liked kohlrabi in the past. It's one of the few things that grow from the earth that I just have not found a place in my diet. And I'm super stoked to try my own kohlrabi.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you guys were talking, I think of my sister used to live in Seattle, and she was part of a community garden, an urban garden. And wow, it was very, very impressive to be able to not just witness these gardens, but also to witness the sharedness amongst each other, and being able to see a fellow neighbor just being in the next plot, but just a few feet away, and be able to see this beautiful, luscious plants, edible plants that they, grew. The community of sharing tips. She had a neighbor that many, many decades old. He's like 80, 90. I don't remember exactly how old he was, but he's just one of these older, shorter, Japanese, Chinese immigrants. And he just walks around, and, he's hunched over. He has his, hands behind his back. And, he would just like walk kind of like Yoda, just like walk past, and he would just say like, "Oh, you're doing it wrong," and he would just spit out like some other random tip. And then he just walks away. And then my sister's just left. She's just like, a WTF moment. And, but it's just one of those things where you wouldn't be able to get if you were not part of a community or urban garden. Right. And I think that kind of talks about, what we're all, conveying here is it's not just growing the food, but you're also having that shared experience. You're also having, historically, in terms of human history, that communal aspect as well that has been really, really broken down on so many different layers in terms of where we are as a society. And in a way, almost like a little bit of a push to kind of go back to that, right? We're missing a lot of that, especially with COVID and having to leverage technology. Sure, you're connecting more, but in a very large sense, you're also being disconnected greatly as well.
Absolutely. Staring at a screen is depressing after a certain amount of time,
Yeah, very, very, very true. So let's close out and, say to the audience, where do we find, Ambrosia, and tell us where we can find you guys and how to source it.
Yeah, definitely. You can go to our website at ambrosiabag.com, or you can check us out on socials. Grae?
Yeah, they're all at Ambrosia Bag. And then our Instagram is at Ambrosia Bags.
Awesome. And if you had maybe one or two takeaways that you want to impart to the audience in terms of how to live more sustainably, right? What would you say? Grae, you can go first.
I think that the biggest thing that everyday person can do is just planning out their grocery trips ahead of time, figuring out what are we going to eat this next week, and have that meeting before you go to the grocery store. And the easiest one is to not go to the grocery store hungry, just for the first step, What do you think, Jordan?
I mean, I would say setting achievable goals.
Yeah.
I think, if you can save $100 a month and a couple trips to the grocery store by changing your behavior and storing your produce in a natural fiber. I mean, I don't want to just plug Ambrosia shamelessly, but I think it's a really easy solution to start this worthwhile for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And especially, like you said, it was at 99.5% of the market is more plastic storage solution. It's definitely a healthier alternative for sure. So guys, thank you so much for being here with us, to sharing your time and sharing your love affair of not just farming, sustainable living, and produce, but what you guys are mindfully putting out there in the world. So I really appreciate your time for today.
Can we offer a promo code maybe?
Yeah, for sure.
I would love that. Shall we do 15% off for all listeners with promo code ChefDoc?
Sounds good. I'm sure everyone's like, yes, saving money in this economy. Yes.
Awesome, Colin. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Colin.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you. Guys, this has been another episode. If you like this, please like and subscribe and comment. And if you felt that this was a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And until then, please say goodbye to Jordan and Grae from Ambrosia. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Colin.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoy that episode. If you like that, please like, comment, and subscribe. And please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. And if you felt that this was a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating, and we greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one.